So today's topic will be on micro nanoplastics, and to begin, we're all talking about macroplastics, so let's begin there first. So let's go to the next slide. So the plastic is, as we all know, is a synthetic polymers that we see all around us. I mean, polyethylene, which we make plastic bags from, PET, the water bottles, PVC pipes for houses, and etc. And we use this material for almost everything because these materials are light, inexpensive, and durable. But at the same time, when we don't need them, we just throw them out without much thinking and hope to never see them again. But let me point out that these materials are very, very durable. So let's go to the next slide. So for decades, plastic pollution was viewed primarily as a waste management problem. So we're thinking about bottles, bags, packaging, tires, and other plastic debris accumulating in the environment, whether that's oceans, rivers, soils, and in other places. But today we know that visible plastic is we know that the visible plastic waste is only part of the story because these materials they don't just disappear. I mean, they gradually break down and fragment into smaller and smaller particles. And these are these are what we call micro and nanoplastics. And even though they're often invisible to the naked eye, they have been found virtually everywhere, from the summit of Mount Everest to the bottom of Mariana Trench. And in our air that we breathe, the water, the soil, food, wildlife, and even in human tissues. So what exactly are micronanoplastics? So microplastics are generally defined as plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters, and nanoplastics those less than 1 micrometer. Note here that the size matters because several important properties begin to change. For example, as the particles become smaller, both the number of particles and the total surface area increases for the same mass of plastics, which increases their potential to interact with, for example, microbes, environmental contaminants, biological systems, etc. The smaller particles are also more mobile, which allows them to travel further through the air and water, and also penetrate deeper into the living systems. In other words, the size, it fundamentally changes how plastics behaves and interacts with the world around it. Now, I want to mention that these particles, tiny particles, don't just appear overnight. I mean, these micronanoplastics are the result of continuous degradation processes, which is driven by the sunlight, oxygen, heat, mechanical vibration, microbial activities, etc. The particles we encounter and expose are aged plastics. And now the question is, what happens when these particles enter the human body? Today, just like our planet, the plastic particles have been detected virtually everywhere, including heart, lungs, kidney, blood, as well as placenta, reproductive organs, breast milk, and first stool of a newborn. And among all human organs, the highest concentration of microplastics were found in the brain, as shown in red. So here in this slide, you can notice that on the y-axis, it's the concentration of micronanoplastics, micrograms per gram, and on the x-axis is different organs, brain, liver, kidney, placenta, testes. And you can notice in the red that brain has by far the highest concentration out of all of these organs that's studied here. And that's by order of magnitude. And if you look at a number a bit more carefully, it's about 5,000 micrograms per gram. And if you do a little bit of math, that translates to about 7 grams of a brain mass, or about 0.5% of our brain is essentially composed of micronanoplastics. And unfortunately, this amount has increased by 50% over the last 8 years, and it will continue to increase as micronanoplastics in our environment is increasing. And interesting note that the patients with dementia have even higher concentration in their brains than those without dementia.
Yeah, exactly. So the presence of these particles is concerning. And the key question is, how do they impact the human health? Today, we have understanding that the harm from micro and nanoplastic is influenced by their key properties, and we would like to highlight 3 of them. First is the chemicals, and micro and nanoplastics, they carry chemical additive that is already many times discussed: phthalates, bisphenols, and polybrominated diphenyl esters. The health impact associated with all these 3 group of compounds are estimated 1.5 trillion in 2015, and having these 16,000 chemicals used for plastic production, most of them are not comprehensively evaluated for long-term human health effect. Second is the size. And the larger particles, these are greater than 1 micron, they generally do not enter cells, but they can still damage the cell membranes through mechanical stress and trigger inflammation. The smaller particles, on the other hand, they can enter the cells or be taken by immune cells. And these particles, they are not fully degraded or eliminated. At the smallest size, about like 9 nanometers, they can interact and disrupt the cell membranes and potentially may cross biological barriers such as intestinal wall, placenta, blood-brain barrier. And these barriers, they become no longer preventive from passage of micro and nanoplastics. And once such particles cross into the tissues, there is no currently any established mechanisms for their removal. And the first factor, it is a charge. We all learned about this chemical toxicity of microplastics, but there is another far less investigated and understood important property that makes micro and nanoplastic dangerous. And the key lies in electrostatic charge. That turns every particle into the active element capable to interact with practically every substance around it. And plastics having really unique electrical properties. It behaves like an electrode. These substances are capable not only accumulating and retaining electrostatic charge for a long time, but also maintaining its own electrical fields over extended period of times. And it works like an invisible battery that holds energy without any external source. And also, plastic particles can recharge themselves, and that occurs through the triboelectric effect. And this process takes place through the friction with other substances, including tissues, cells, and fluids. And in other words, these plastic particles, they can re-energize and restore charge repeatedly. And, like all life, it is dependent on precise electrical signals in the brains, in the heart, and in the nerves. And these cells, like they are really working based on microelectrical signals. And then the charged particles interfere with the process inside of the cells. They disrupt bioelectrical currents, biochemistry, and even cellular communication become even cellular communication and microplastics simply become like a regular resident of a cell. And that is really concerning fact. So the experimental studies shows that charge increases uptake and toxicity that can also cause the DNA damage. And that's all is beyond this beyond all other factors. Like we heard a lot that the size can be a reason for a lot of damages, but we understand that the size itself cannot explain a lot of effects from micro and nanoplastics. And what is important that this charge of the micro and nanoplastic is also relatively stable. It persists from the air to water to blood and doesn't dissipate over time. And therefore, this charge, it's become as a really high research priority, and that can be a key mechanism linking micro and nanoplastics to its biological effects.
So, like knowing all this, so what does that actually mean inside our bodies? And more specifically, like how could the electrical charge of these particles affect the way the cells normally function? And to answer that question, I mean, let's just look at as an example, let's look at one of the most electrically active cells in the human body, and we're talking about neurons. These are the cells that rely on electrical signals to communicate with one another, making them a great example of how charged particles can interfere with normal cell function. So we have a small animation, so let's play that.
Neuron functions like a miniature battery. It constantly maintains a difference in electrical charge between the inside and outside of its membrane. This enables the neuron to be ready to transmit a signal at the right moment. Charged nanoplastic disturbs this delicate balance, making the cell behave unpredictably. A neuron may activate prematurely, like a light flickering on without command, or conversely fail to transmit a signal when needed. Such interference disrupts the operation of entire neural networks.
Neuron.
Nanoplastic interfere.
Next slide. Yeah, and neurons are just one example, and in reality, the effects of micronanoplastics are not only limited to particular cell type. They can also interfere with the fundamental structures like organelles that are found virtually in every human cells of our body. And one of the most important organelle is the mitochondria, and this is often referred to as a cell's powerhouse because it produces ATP, which is a molecule that powers our cellular function. So we also have another animation. So let's play that next.
The electrostatic charge and minute size of nanoplastic particles allow them to penetrate deep into the cell and accumulate even within mitochondria, disrupting their function. Such a condition is known as mitochondrial dysfunction, a state in which mitochondria can no longer perform their essential roles.
Next slide. Beyond, let's go next slide. Yeah, and beyond mitochondrial dysfunction, there's another major mechanism how micronanoplastics can harm our body, and that is called oxidative stress, because these microplastics can trigger overproduction of what's called the reactive oxygen species. These are highly reactive molecules that can damage, for example, DNA, proteins, and cell membranes. And when these molecules build up, they can lead to, for example, inflammation, accelerate aging, and contribute to, for example, chronic diseases.
Beyond these effects, there are, at the cellular level, also micro and nanoplastic may influence microbial systems. And studies from 2005 shows that plastic can promote the development of the antibiotic resistance in bacteria that is contributing to the global health challenges. And why? Because the plastic provides an ideal surface for bacterial growth. And in 2019, antibiotic resistance became the direct cause of more than 1 million deaths. And that is affected over 5 million additional deaths through the associated complications. So I would like to show you just very brief animation showing how microplastic affects the microbes and building the microfilms.
When bacteria come into contact with microplastic, they activate a special metabolism linked to electron transfer. Simply put, plastic particles can share electrons with bacteria, acting as a kind of power bank for them. This process is called extracellular electron transfer. It gives bacteria extra energy. First, it makes them stronger, helping them divide faster, mutate, and build especially tough multi-layered biofilms, keeping antibiotics from penetrating inside.
All these facts are extremely concerning, but what do these cellular and molecular changes mean for human health? The increasing evidence suggests that these mechanisms that we just described, including oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and these impaired signaling issues, they are involved in the most of chronic diseases. And although long-term human studies are still evolving, the presence of micro and nanoplastic in human tissues now is well established. And the biological evidence continues to grow. And these are the same process as the human aging. These all mechanisms driving the same as a human aging. And in the next slides, I would like just briefly highlight several major disease categories in which micro and nanoplastic are emergent as a potential contributing factor. First is nervous system, and as Dr. An mentioned, that micro and nanoplastic were detected in the human brain and at the highest concentrations than in any other organs. And experimental studies shows that the micro and nanoplastics, they disrupt neuron electrical signaling, interfere with ion channels, impair mitochondrial dysfunction, and increase oxidative stress. All these conditions and mechanisms are involved in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer and Parkinson's disease. Immune system. The immune cells appear to be very vulnerable to plastic exposures. Researchers at the University Medical Center Utrecht have found that the immune cells exposed to micro and nanoplastics dies approximately 3 times faster than unexposed cell. And the compromised immune system, we know it's not a disease itself, but this is the conditions that contributes to development of many other diseases. The next one, and extremely concerning, is the cardiovascular system. And plastic particles, they found within atherosclerosis plaques, and the presence of them associated with increased risk of a heart attack and stroke. And when micro and nanoplastics are detected in plaques of the carotid arteries, the risk of major adverse cardiovascular events, including death, increased about 4.5 times. Also, another big concern is the cancer. And as we have shown, like all these processes and mechanisms related to micro and nanoplastics, oxidative stress, damage of mitochondrial DNA, disrupting of normal cell death pathways, that is, and cellular mechanisms, these are all important for healthy body. And once there is number of these cells, that non-healthy cell is increasing, we observe formation of cancer. And the recent studies also suggesting that micro and nanoplastics may promote the tumor cell migration and metastasis. Although all these mechanisms currently under investigation, but there is growing evidence showing that micro and nanoplastic can be one of them. One of the big factors. And on our website, you can find the interviews with oncologists and other scientists who are talking about the effect of micro and nanoplastics. The next system is related is fertility, and growing evidence suggests that the reproductive system is really vulnerable to micro and nanoplastics. The study from China detected that micro and nanoplastics in 100% of semen samples analyzed, and in women, these particles have also been detected in ovarian follicular fluid in 14 out of 18 women, and with concentration of micro and nanoplastics over 2,000 particles per millimeters. And that is demonstrating that both sperm and developing eggs can be directly exposed to plastic particles. And today, 1 in 6 adults worldwide experience infertility, and the numbers continue to rise. And we understand that infertility is multifactorial conditions. Researchers are increasingly investigating whether the micro and nanoplastic accumulation in reproductive is one of the contributing factors, but this topic is getting more and more attention. And perhaps the most concerning is that exposure to these particles begins before birth. Micro and nanoplastic were found in placentas, amniotic fluid, and in first stool of newborns. It really shows that this development, fetal development, can occur in already contaminated environment. And this exposure can have significant consequences. For example, placentas from preterm birth babies, they contain significantly higher concentrations of micro and nanoplastics than those which were born full term, and also higher concentrations of PVC, PET, polyurethane, and polycarbonate. They were associated with earlier gestational age and lower birth weight. Children also, their exposure to micro and nanoplastic is much higher. Relative to body weight, they consume more food, air than adults. So that is telling that the exposure is higher. But also, the estimate shows that newborn have fewer cells than adult. So the newborn would have about 7 trillion cells, while adult 30 trillions. And it means that the same amount of plastic may represent a greater burden on each cell. And also, we understand that the development of nerve system, immune, endocrine, cardiovascular system, they are still developing and under these dangerous conditions. And they are, while being developed, they can be more susceptible to damage. And the effect of this early life exposure, they can accumulate silently, and we can detect effects only years after these babies will be growing up. What is also interesting is that these researchers are now investigating how this prenatal and early life exposure of micro and nanoplastic contributing to neurodevelopmental disorders. And although the causality is still established, it was already studies showing this prenatal exposure to plastic associated with chemicals like BPA. It was linked to the increased likelihood of autism spectrum disorder. And today, approximately in the United States, 1 in 31 children are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So, taken together, these findings suggest that micro and nanoplastics may affect multiple organs, and they are influencing health from very early stages of life. But identifying risk is only the first step, and the most important question, what we can do about it.
Yeah, so of course, reducing plastic uses, improving recycling, cleaning up, what's in the contaminants in the environment. It's really important because we need to protect our planet, but at the same time, these efforts don't change the fact that micro nanoplastics are already accumulated everywhere. And we're talking about oceans, rivers, soils, air, and even in our brains. Ideally, we should remove all these harmful particles. They're bad. They're bad for us, as we just talked about it. But in practice, because these particles, micro nanoplastics, because they're so small and widespread, removing these invisible particles effectively at scale, it's going to be unrealistic. So what we propose today is that perhaps we need to reframe this question. That is, instead of focusing on how to remove these microplastics, maybe we should focus on making them less harmful. And this is where electrostatic charge becomes especially interesting, because unlike other properties like particle size or polymer types, which we cannot control once the plastic is produced, the charge is something that we can still modify. And as we discussed before, the plastic particles accumulate and retain charge as they move through the air, water, and biological fluids. And this charge can influence how they interact with cells, proteins, and DNA, and even help cross biological barriers like placenta and blood-brain barriers. So if electrostatic charge turns out to be one of the key drivers of these interactions, then modifying or at least partially neutralizing that charge could, for example, reduce adhesion to attaching to cells, limiting the transport across biological barriers, or even promote aggregation of water, making these particles easier to monitor and remove. And whether this approach ultimately proves effective or not, it's remained to be seen. But it represents a promising new research direction that may eventually help us to reduce the impact of micro nanoplastics on both human health and the environment. Thank you.
So, and in order to investigate more in this direction, we invite you to read the report Nanoplastics in a Biosphere from Molecular Impact to Planetary Crisis. And also, we strongly invite you to watch the documentary, award-winning documentary, Nanoplastics Threat to Life, that is available on ALLATRA Global Research Center website. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anastasia and Dr. John. I think it is the need of the time that this webinar should be end on the high concerning note. And I hope that every participant is now concerned about plastic, because it is not just about that plastic is on our land, in our oceans, or you can say it's a problem as a waste. It is now entering in our body, and most of the things are new and astonishing for me, especially the electrostatic charge thing. So thank you so much for this technical and concerning lecture and sharing your time and expertise with us. Thank you so much.